So let me introduce everyone one by one. Our moderator for tonight's presentation is Shahar Azani. Mr. Azani is the Executive Director of StandWithUs, the Northeast region of the organization. He is, and of course everybody is familiar, I hope, with StandWithUs. It's an international nonprofit Israel education organization that is dedicated to supporting Israel around the world. Prior to assuming his responsibilities with StandWithUs, Mr. Azani served in various diplomatic capacities for the government of Israel. The last position in which he served was Consul for Media Affairs and spokesperson at the Consulate General of Israel here in New York. It's a position that he held between 2011 and 2014. Mr. Yitzhak Ben-Horin is a journalist. He has been a journalist and commentator for 41 years. In the last 11 years, he has been the Washington bureau chief of Ynet, Israel's leading news website in Hebrew and in English. Since 1996, Mr. Ben-Horin has covered 3 U.S. presidents, 4 peace summits, the American government in general and American politics in general, and of course the relations between the United States and Israel, and most importantly these days, the effort to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Next to him is Mr. Benny Avni. He is a Newsweek diplomatic correspondent. Also, he's a New York Post columnist and a New York reporter for Israel Radio. His career in journalism started in 1980 in Tel Aviv. He worked for Haaretz and its sister publication Hadashot, and many other national publications. He's based in New York, has been based in New York since 1986, and he has been reporting and publishing stories on Jewish and national media outlets, and he has also been published in the New York Times. Then we have here with us tonight, we're pleased to have Mr. Ron Jacobson, with almost 3 decades of experience in the media, both in Israel and here in the US. Mr. Jacobson is serving today as the news anchor, in the news department of the Jewish Broadcasting Service, or JBS, formerly known, I believe, as Shalom TV. Mr. Jacobson began his media career as a correspondent at the Maariv daily newspaper, where he was its first ever Los Angeles bureau chief. Mr. Jacobson was also a reporter for the Jewish global news channel JN1, and as chief correspondent there, he covered all the burning issues of the day in the Jewish world from Israel and across Europe. So it is my pleasure to welcome our panelists and our moderator, and I turn over the program to Mr. Azani, and welcome, and we're looking forward to hearing from each of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, the Deputy Consul Sagi. It's a great pleasure to have this opportunity this evening to dive into the depth of Israeli politics, a labyrinthian topic as it is on a daily basis, for which reason we have here an esteemed panel of experts, after which we will all know the results of the upcoming elections, which in itself will be a terrific opportunity. Maybe just before we start, I'd like to say a big thank you to, it's been a joy working with the JCRC, also collaborating with the Kaplan JCC, and also acknowledge a board member of StandWithUs, Martha Cohen, who is here with us tonight. And again, a great pleasure. So just before we begin, maybe I'll go over quickly some of the parties' names, the major players in these upcoming elections, and I'll just focus on the major ones so that we know what we refer to before we dive into the issue. So the composition of the current Knesset is we have the Habayit HaYehudi, the Jewish Home Party, led by Naftali Bennett, which has 12 seats in the current Knesset and is a right-wing party. The Arab List, which is running jointly, a topic we'll touch later on, currently has together in the current Knesset overall 11 seats between the different parties, but again, they are running as one. The Likud party, led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has 18 seats in the current Knesset. Meretz, the left-wing party, with 6 members of Knesset. Shas, the Sephardic ultra-Orthodox party, has 11 members of Knesset in the current election, in the current Knesset. The United Torah Judaism, which is basically the ultra-Orthodox Ashkenazi party, which has 7 seats in the Knesset. Yesh Atid, led by Yair Lapid, the centrist party, with 19 seats in the current Knesset. Israel Beitenu, Israel Our Home, led by Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, 13 members in the last Knesset, and the Labour Party, also known as the Zionist Camp, so far with 15 members of Knesset, along with Tzipi Livni's the Movement Hatnuah, 6 members of Knesset, but now they're running together under the headline of the Zionist Camp. So before we dive into it, and before we go into the specific questions, maybe I'll ask our esteemed panelists who are basking in the sunlight to say a few words, or an opening statement, and maybe we'll start from the right wing.
Okay. First of all, I'm coming here from Shtetl Rockville. We have a JCC as well. Not as big and nice as yours. Like as in every Israeli, I'm going to start from the end. And the end is that after those elections, whoever will win, even if there will be a cut, clean winner, I think he will be a prime minister for not more than a year or two. So we have to prepare ourselves to the next elections. Why so? Because as Shahar showed you the numbers, there were times that a party, big party in Israel, was about 50 seats, 40-something seats, the Labour Party, and then the Likud Party. Nowadays, you have mediocre parties. Like if you have 24 seats, you'll be the prime minister. And then you have to give like a fraction of 8 seats. You have to give him the sky and the stars. So it's not going to last for long. And if you are going to ask about rotation, my answer is the same. The one with the bigger party, more seats, will be the first prime minister, but he will be the last prime minister because the rotation will not going to take place because they are going to shut it down before the end of the 2 years or so. It's like, so it's an ongoing campaign. It's like being a congressman in the U.S. Senate, Congress, the House. You have to run in the moment for 2 years. In the moment that you are elected, you are already in a campaign. So it's crazy if you are a prime minister and you have a good goal in front of you. You have to have 4 years at least, because if you want to do something that people will suffer at the beginning, and then after a while they'll see the fruit, they'll get the outcome of the act. It's not going to happen in a 2-year Knesset. It's not going to. So instead of being a prime minister of Israel, you are becoming the chief editor because you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about what is the spin, what I'm doing in the last headlines of this morning, and then in the afternoon, what are we going to do for tomorrow papers? You don't have time to low profile and to shut the door and to start working for the state of Israel.
You have 2 major blocks in Israeli politics. One, the left-wing bloc, which is currently led by the Zionist camp, as Shahar said. The other, the right-wing camp, which is currently led by Likud. In order, unlike the US, where whoever wins the presidency becomes president, an Israeli winner will have to somehow compose a coalition. And the question is, who has a better path an easier path to creating a governing coalition? The answer right now is that even though the momentum is going to the centrist left camp, the Zionist camp led by Herzog, I still think, and I think most analysts still think that Netanyahu has a better chance of creating a coalition. in order for the left-wing camp to create a coalition, they need to have like very unnatural alliances, such as the alliance between the Orthodox and Lapid, who has traditionally ran on a anti-Orthodox legislation. You have to have perhaps the Arabs and Lieberman, who is running on an anti-Arab campaign. You have to have all kinds of very unnatural coalitions. On the right wing, it's easier for them to compose a coalition that will have the Bennett camp, which is the far right, and the Orthodox, and Kulanu, which is Kahlon's party. All of this is easier, but in Israeli politics is kind of strange because you have something called a president, whose role usually is ceremonial. He does nothing other than visits. It's like the US vice president, goes to funerals and that kind of stuff. But he has one very important role in life, and that is he is the one who is charged with deciding who will compose the next government. And he does that by assessing who has a better chance to do that. Now, if Herzog's party, Herzog-Livni party, wins by 4 or 5 seats over Netanyahu, he will almost surely go with them. If it's less, then it's more dicey for them. Then it's more likely that he will give Bibi the first crack at it. So that's, I think, that's a primer towards what I think is going to happen next week. And again, it's the future. We don't know what's going to happen.
Good evening, everyone. So, at my job at JBS, we a lot talk about explaining to our American Jewish viewers what's happening in Israel, kind of like doing the transition between what's on in Israeli television, Israeli politics, to the American audience. And we found ourselves explaining to everyone the Israeli political system, which is kind of complex and difficult to grasp for Americans because it is so different. I mean, it's very much like the European system, but in America it's very, very different. So basically, I don't know if you all know, but the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament, has 120 seats. In order to create the new government, a party needs to have a coalition that is at least 61 members in that coalition. So as my two distinguished colleagues said, everyone wants to be the one who will have a crack at building that coalition. It is very much a puzzle. There's a lot of blackmail going on because every party that has 2 or 3 seats, in order to go with that specific party, in order to create a coalition, will demand things and in many cases also get it. They have tried to change the system in Israel in this current election by raising the percentage of how much you need to achieve in order to get into the Knesset from 3.5% to 5%, so that the little parties will have a lesser of a chance of getting in, and then later on, while doing the coalition talks, have less of a power in order to do those blackmails. We have a lot of history with especially the religious parties doing that. So if we look at the polls that have been published today in the various Israeli channels, it is that the Zionist camp has more MKs than the Likud, but only in 3 or 4 more. That's not a majority. Again, as I mentioned before, you need to have at least 61 MKs with you in order to create that government, and it's going to be very difficult. To Herzog, he can go out on a limb and do something that hasn't been done for many, many years, and have the support of the Arab Party, which is supposedly going to get 11 or 12 seats. This can be a deciding vote if they will go with him. However, if we do want to remember, last time when that happened, that the Arab parties supported a prime minister, that prime minister ended up with 3 bullets in him. Referring to Yitzhak Rabin, of course. So it is a very dangerous game as well to go that route. But as I say to people, it all comes down to how desperate anyone will be to sit in the prime minister's seat.
I have to say, it's always a pleasure to see the optimism. I wanted to say also that the window into politics and diplomacy we also have in the current documentary by Netflix called The House of Cards. But maybe let's dive into the business for a minute. And I want as honest and sincere answer as possible. And I want to ask you this, and the same question for the 3 of you, as continuous observers of Israel-US relations, and you being part of basically the American Jewish community in its entirety, whether here in DC or beyond. Last week, Prime Minister Netanyahu came to the US, made a speech for political reasons, for Iran. What, in your opinion, was, if at all, the impact of that speech on the Israeli elections? And the second question, in a more general context, historically and now, what is the role of Israel-US relations in the Israeli elections, with the Israeli electorate?
First of all, I'm willing to talk about the future. I think that if you're not Putin or Chavez or Gaddafi, being a prime minister for 6 years, it's a lot. Sometimes it's too much. And Bibi is in a big, big trouble. If you look at him, look at his face, you see a very worried man. That's number one. Because the problem that he has to tackle, and he hasn't for 6 years, if you take only the housing crisis, by itself, it's a great reason why to send the prime minister home in every country in the Western world. A full generation of youngsters can't afford have a house in Israel. And if you're talking about the Iranian threat about Israel, let me tell you about the relocated threat about Israel. In my time, if you leave Israel, you are a Yored. Today, when you look at the newspapers, they call it the youngster relocation to Berlin. So when Bibi is shouting Iran, because he wants to talk about Iran, because there is nothing else to talk about right now. He can't talk about the education that is in crisis, not the hospitals that in real trouble. If you look all around, we are in a big mess. So he's a very capable politician. He's looking around and he says, guys, leave it alone. Look at Iran. That's a huge, huge problem. They threaten our own existence. I'm the only one who can do it. The 2 kids, Tzipi and Bougie, they can't do it. Me, I can do it. So that's his all motive. And then that's the only reason why he came to Washington. Because if you are really, really scared about the Iranian threat, so don't wait to March 3rd. First of all, he got the first option to go to Washington at February 11, but he decided to go later, closer to the elections. Why? How come, even you think that Obama is a Kenyan, a Muslim, Israel hater, whatever you can think about Obama. He's the president of the United States. You can't snub him and behind his back going to the Congress. You are not going to do it. Now, if you're talking about Iran, he could come to Washington to give a great speech at AIPAC. He's a great speaker. He could speak at AIPAC, give interviews, non-stop interviews. He could ask the Congress to do a closed session with both houses. Closed session. In closed session, you can tell them, you can explain them why you are different from your president. So I think it was the best for the Iran issue. But Iran was not the issue. The issue was the election. And Iran is the only card that he can hold right now. So you can see what happened in Israel right after he came back. He bumped up a little bit. One seat maybe, and now back down. Now it's around the little party, the Zionist party, they have 24 or 25. He has like less 4 or 3 seats. It depends which poll. I don't trust the polls, first of all. I assume that the margin will be bigger, and I'll tell you why. If you asked me a month ago, I would tell you that there are 2 camps, and they change number between them, but the right camp is a bigger one and has better chance to compose the next government. Now I can see a phenomena that 2 guys steal voters from the right and moving them to the center left. One of them is Kahalon. He's a Likud guy who was fed up of being a minister of Bibi, the same as Shahar that quitted. And there is a reason why they quitted. And he's a social, expert, and he's a guy that will steal moderate Likud guys. And I think that, and he don't want to have a government with Bibi. He will go with Bougie. So I think that he will steal some vote from the Likud. Also, I think that Lieberman, because of the criminal investigation, not because after, I would send him home because other things, but maybe he's not going to pass even the minimum to be in the Knesset at all. And I think that Yair Lapid, which is somewhere in the middle, is stealing his votes, is from the Russians and others. So maybe in 1 week, I'll be the stupid sucker that told you a story, a foolish story. And you remember, this guy came from Washington. I don't know. My feeling is telling me that there is a trend now, and if there is no kind of military action that the Prime Minister has his power, like the Shavit rocket that Ben-Gurion sent in 1961, maybe, like, there are things that people, if you're a Prime Minister, you have ability to create something. So if there's nothing there, Hamas want Bibi to be the Prime Minister, as you know. So maybe they'll do something, God forbid. So if the situation will stay the same, I bet on the Zionist camp, and mark my word, and you know what you can tell me about me if they lose.
So Benny, based on what he said, is the Israeli public punishing Prime Minister Netanyahu for ruining the relationship with the U.S.?
I am much less critical of Bibi than Horin here, and I don't think the situation in Israel is that bad. But I do agree about one thing, and that is that Bibi has been in power for a long, long time, and in any democracy, anybody who's been in power for that long has a lot of baggage, and hence the whole idea that both of these camps are fighting against each other. Name calling. Anybody but Bibi is the biggest slogan of the Herzog camp, and as Ben-Horin said, Bibi's slogan is anybody except for Bougie and Tzipi. But if you look at all his the most recent video clip is about Tzipi and Bougie will give away everything. There's a nightmare scenario in which they will take over, and he actually shows how they can build a bloc and says to prevent that you must vote for Likud. But back to the question that we were here for, and that you brought up before, and that is how much did the speech in here has it made any difference? I agree totally that it hasn't. That it I disagree, by the way, that Bibi planned it for political reasons only. I'm sure that, you know, he's a politician. I'm not falling off my chair when politicians do things for political reasons, especially during an election season. Hey, you know. But on the other hand, there's a very strong reason why to do it now, other than the election, and that is that, as planned, this agreement was supposed to have an initial signing at the end of March, and this was a good time to, if you want to prevent it, if you think that the speech at the Congress would prevent it, it's a good time to come and actually prevent it. Let's not get into a debate about that. Let's not relitigate that. But the question here is not so much. So I don't think that it made a difference because of that factor that Itzik brought in, and that is that there's no question that there is a certain fatigue, Bibi fatigue, call it, in the Israeli electorate, and housing is a symptom, I think, much more than an actual, detrimental problem. If you look at the Israeli economy, it's fairly sound, especially if you compare it to other countries, European countries. It's fairly sound compared, and it's actually better than it was before.
And if I may add, a poll that I just read, Israel is in the 12th place in the world, in all the world, of the countries where people are most happy. I was very surprised by that. But yes.
And just one more thing about what it means as far as U.S. and
yes, I want to push on that
US
point. Does the Israeli electorate
so,
care about the relationship between Israel and the U.S.?
They do, but less so than they did in the past. And one reason for that is if you look at polling numbers in Israel, not in America. Obama, question if Obama is a friend of Israel or not. If you compare that to past presidents, especially to the last two, Clinton and Bush, the numbers are very low in Israel. Very few people think he's a good friend of Israel, and therefore, at least to Bibi's voters, who really dislike Obama, it helps solidify his voting side. But the question here is whether there will be a tremendous change if there's a change of power now. If Labor comes to power, will it improve the relations that we obviously have been following, the Bibi Obama drama for the last 6 years, and it's devastating. But I'm not sure there will be a huge change. First of all, because either way, if Bougie, that's Herzog's name, if Bougie wins, he will have to have some right-wingers, Kahlon, for instance, in his party, in his coalition. And it would be very difficult for him to do stuff that he is now saying that he would do. And the other factor is he still has, as former Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Shamir, used to say, the sky is the same sky, the sea is the same sea, and the Arabs are the same Arabs. So he will still have to deal with Abbas, who, in my estimation, has no political wherewithal to sign anything that any Israeli Prime Minister would sign. So it's still a very difficult situation between Israelis and the Palestinians. The Iranian issue still remains, and if you listen to the rhetoric that's coming from the Bougie camp, they're not happy with this agreement that is being formed. They are saying that they would do it absolutely different than Bibi has done it. They wouldn't be so. They wouldn't be so blatant. They wouldn't come over here and fight against an American president. They would do it behind the scenes and so on and so forth. But the problem still remains. The U.S. looks at this as a very important, or the administration looks at this as a very important agreement, and the Israelis, by and large, do not.
Right.
One thing that I want to say to Itzik, that according to the latest polls, around 20% of the Israeli electorate are undecided what they're going to vote on election day, which means the equivalent of between 7 to 10 MKs. And that could definitely swing an election in any way.
Even among those
parties that we were talking about. So we
even
don't
among
know
those
yet.
who said that they are going to vote for a certain party, some of them are still
undecided.
Now,
I wanted to say something about the speech. I was probably I think that I was probably one of the only naive people who thought that if Bibi is fighting it out with the administration and getting into such a rift with Obama, he has
disagreements.
Right. He has ammunition. He will have a jaw-dropping moment in that speech in Congress where he's going to say something that everybody's going to say, oh, really? That's why Obama was wrong and the Republicans were right. I felt, for Israelis that sometimes come off as very macho, showing, I'll show Obama, will give him a lot of additional MKs. Did not happen.
So he came to the Congress, he made a speech, and he stopped the nuclear. That's it. No nuclear anymore.
I feel it was a very stupid move on his part. Yeah. It was not worth it.
Okay. 2 former prime ministers was advised by the Mossad and others not to be too much out front, not to make it Israel versus Iran, make it the world against Iran. And that's the way it was under Sharon and under Olmert. Now,
Sharon and Olmert were also dealing with a different American president.
Okay, but they were still dealing with Iran, with the same mullahs, and with the same enriched uranium. It's the same.
Yeah, but this president sees an agreement with Iran as his legacy achievement.
Okay, so he should take the plan, go to Europe, because there were six countries who are dealing with Iran, not one. So go first of all to go to Germany, France, Great Britain, go to your friend Putin, go to your new friend, the Chinese. First of all, try to convince them. And then come to Washington and try to convince President Obama. And by the way, you can speak at AIPAC, you can speak in closed session with the Congress, and you better do it in December, not in March. So still nobody convinced me that it's not an election stance.
I think, let me take this discussion one step forward to the elections. And something very interesting is happening in these elections. As a result of the new Governance Act, the threshold to enter the Knesset was raised to 3.25% of the eligible votes. The result of that reality is, the meaning was to try to create better governance in Israel and to allow for more stable coalitions and strong parties to come in. What happened was that among the Arab parties, which were around 4 parties in the last Knesset, they came together in order to run together in these elections, to make it into the Knesset. For running alone would not allow them to pass the new threshold that was created. And as a result, we're facing a situation in which a unified joint Arab party is running in the elections that had 11 seats and now has 12, may have 13, 14, some are even dreaming of 15 or more. It all depends on the voting percentage within the Arab community population in Israel. And the other issue is this. Could we be facing a situation, maybe we'll start with you, Benny, a situation in which the head of the opposition in the next Knesset will be attorney Ayman Oda, head of the joint Arab list?
Well, it's interesting, by the way, in every election round in Israel, there's what they call atmosphere parties. Right. At one time, it was the party of the retirees. And surprisingly, tons of hipsters in Tel Aviv, young hipsters, voted for them. Why? Because it was cute.
It's the future.
I'll vote for the old people. I love them. And I saw polls that say the same about the Arab Party. A lot of Jews in Tel Aviv, hipsters, are saying, oh, I'll vote for the Arabs. Fantastic.
And by the way, their propaganda is talking to those exactly.
All right. Anyway, but this, put that aside. I think the numbers that the Arab will put on will be very, very impressive. I don't think they can be that unless all the Jewish parties go into a coalition, which I doubt will happen, and we may want to talk later about the possibility of a unified government between the Likud and the Zionist camp. But unless that happens, that everybody is in, including Lapid, including everybody, I don't see them as heading the opposition, but they will be very powerful. And frankly, in my view, excellent. I think that if the Arabs get a lot of power in the Knesset, we're talking budgets, we're talking moving, making education in Arab villages higher and so on and so forth.
And it's great for Israeli public opinion.
Well, they have always been pushed aside by the big parties, even their allies, even during Rabin's time when they were in the government. The budgets were always lower to Arab municipalities. It's good that there will be better living conditions in the Arab villages. By the way, I don't want to sound racist, but it may even lower, because usually they say that the higher the living standards, the lower the birth rates. That's an issue too.
Always a positive vibe.
But more seriously, I think that one of the reasons why Arabs are lower on the wage scale and economic ladder is because education is not as prevalent, and women do not participate as much as in the Jewish communities, except for the Orthodox, in the workforce, which of course lowers the household wage. So,
but when you say
that
education,
changes, that's good.
The Arab society still has the same educational system as in Israel. They go to elementary school, to high school. Some of them decide not to go to college.
Talking budgets.
But you know what, Itzik, I want to go to you for a minute. Do you think they're going to stay together? 11, I mean, the unified list?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No, it's something artificial. So I'll go to get, let's say, even 15. But they are not going to stay together. Maybe for 10 days they'll be the head of the opposition. But sooner or later, each one of them will go back to his roots. Because the Communist Party is a serious one. You can object it, but their ideology, they know what they are doing. And there is another one that can work with the Israeli parties. But there are two elements there that are completely against the country, against the state of Israel. So I don't see them stick together for a long time.
Or maybe they will stick together.
Even less than the government.
Or maybe they will stick together, and in the next election we'll see maybe the religious parties all running together and getting many...
Ron.
By the way, just one more addition to that. It's a very good point, and I think that it's a good point that you can extrapolate to the rest of the Israeli electorate, politics, the world of politics. And that is that alliances are ad hoc. I mean, we see Tzipi Livni started. Actually, if you look at all the people that might unseat Bibi, Livni, Kahlon, the president, they're all Likud, but no longer. So Lieberman as well. All those people are Likud and no longer, and could very well be the reason why Bibi is no longer. So alliances in Israel start today, split tomorrow.
So that's why 2 years. The government, next government, no more than 2 years.
Ron, you had experience covering the media from Hollywood. And I want to ask you about Israeli infomercials for the different parties. Some people claim that the recent elections have been very shallow, no real discussion of the issues, focusing on lovely videos like Babysitter, the kindergarten, ISIS on the way to Jerusalem. Quite the jams, I highly recommend. What do you have to say?
Well, first of all,
are we approaching Hollywood?
this time, you know, in Israel, the election propaganda is actually regulated by the Central Election Committee, which can approve or ban a clip from going on. However, this time, the Israeli parties have discovered the internet. On the internet, you can say and do whatever you feel like. So even though officially the election propaganda are on for only like 2.5 weeks in Israel, we've had those propagandas going on Facebook, on YouTube for months now, and with very, very cute and I must say very creative clips. Bibi had amazing people working for him.
So Likud was most creative.
We're very creative. I'm saying Bibi was participating in all those clips, which was kind of interesting to see how he became an actor. He had a clip as the kindergarten teacher, and all the kids in the kindergarten were dressed up as the different.
Because it was illegal to employ
right.
kids.
It was X'd when they wanted to put it on TV because the election committee said you're not allowed to use children in propaganda. But on Facebook, it was there. It's still on YouTube. He had a clip where he comes in and says, I am the babysitter, as in the babysitter, to two parents who want to go out, and they say, you coming to look after our kids? He says, yes, I come in to not look after your kids, but not everybody's kids. And you see the Prime Minister of Israel as an actor in this little sitcom of a few minutes. I thought that was great.
ממי, למתי הזמנת את הבייביסיטר? אנחנו מאחרים.
אוי, ראש הממשלה. איזה כבוד. מה אתה עושה פה?
הזמנתם בייביסיטר? קיבלתם ביביסיטר. איפה הילדים?
אבל אתה ראש הממשלה. אתה תשמור לנו על הילדים?
תראו, זה או אני, או ציפי ובוז'י.
לא. בוז'י, הילדים שלנו צריכים לשמור עליו.
עד שנחזור לא יהיה לנו בית.
הוא אפילו ימסור את השטיחים. וציפי?
ציפי, 2 במקום אחד.
עד שתחזרו, היא בטח כבר תעבור לשכנים. בבחירות הקרובות, אתם בוחרים מי ישמור על הילדים שלנו. בבחירות הקרובות, מצביעים רק הליכוד. די, ציפי.
שלום.
לא בכל תנאי.
And another party that did very well was actually the Orthodox party, whose letter is Gimel, which is C. So they had a whole campaign with multiple choice questions, which always the right answer was C as in Gimel, which is their letter to put in the in the voting. I found that very, very
amusing.
Very amusing. But in the last few days, I must tell you, they understood that, okay, it's cute, it's creative, but propaganda is propaganda, and they went back to fear everything, the end of the world. If you don't do this, it will be the end of Israel, and I guess this is what they believe will get the people to vote. This is, by the way,
interesting because it's always easier to make movies that are entertaining if you're saying things are hunky-dory. If you're saying things are horrible, doesn't translate into a very fun short clip. And that's why I think Bibi had a much easier job, because his job was to say everything is great. Their job was to say, hey, if you elect Bibi again, there will be no housing, no kids, there will be war, Obama will hate us. You know, all the their commercials were much more, the labor camp, Zionist camp, commercial was much more bleak and much more pessimistic than
But well, I want to just as something for the three of you. But there is no difference between the Bougie Livni camp and the Bibi camp when it comes to actual policies. As you indicated before, you said that on issues of Palestinians, Iran, security, it's exactly the same.
So we said before that what Bibi has to do, what he left to do, is a scare tactic. People, leave it all, housing, education. We have an existential threat from Iran. So I saw today in the paper, it's not as sophisticated as you said. I saw one protester with a banner said, I can die from hunger before I'll die from Iran. So that's the serious issue. Because they don't, while Bibi was in Washington doing his things, you know how to speak, he's a great speaker, people in Israel not really care about what he's saying because they have a real problem, daily problem. They do care about their today call from the bank. It's more important for them than getting call from, I don't know where, from the White House.
This was, by the way, Kahlon's campaign, the whole thing.
Yes.
Who are you getting calls from, the White House or your bank? Who are you getting calls from, Ahmadinejad or your mortgage company?
So the policies are the same?
I want to go back to one issue that you raised before, and that is the threshold issue.
Okay.
And I think that may well determine the winner next week, because of that this threshold was raised, some parties that have always been there might disappear. People are saying Lieberman might not do it. You said that. Meretz is actually, according to polling lower than Lieberman, and they could disappear. Meretz has been there since I was a kid and grew up in Mapam, kibbutz, in the kibbutzim. Meretz might disappear, which would be, and Meretz, by the way, this is a nuance that we may not want to get into. It's too far in the weeds, but there's something called an agreement of over votes. So if you are very close, that basically two parties can agree on, if you have a certain number of votes that would give you another seat or less of a seat, that it will go to the other party. Meretz wanted to have such an agreement with the Arab parties. The Arab party was refused. That could be the doom of Meretz. There are some, and also, by the way, from the right, you have the Sephardic Orthodox party split up. So Yishai, which might disappear as well. There's another luminary of Israeli politics that might disappear because he just can't get into the Knesset. And he would have gone with Bibi, obviously, so it's a loss for the right. So there's a lot of scenarios here that could really change tremendously the ability of each camp to compose a coalition just by, their natural allies disappear.
So Prime Minister Netanyahu made a huge mistake by going for elections at this time, or not?
Most of the time, when you change the date of the election, you are losing. Many times, I think he lost.
What made him go for election?
You called it. The name is Sheldon Adelson. That's the name. If you want me to explain to you why, I can do it.
To be fair, he works for a competition.
I'm a journalist. I'm a free journalist. It's somebody who gets his money, $100 million from gambling business. He can, in one day, he can raise money, he can get money that allow him to hold a newspaper in Israel that become the most popular in Israel because it's for free. Not only for free, also the advertising is almost for free.
But Itzik, there's free newspapers here in New York too. I mean, this is not
I
why...
started my career in an Israeli...
Israel is a market.
I started my career in journalism in 1980 in a newspaper in Tel Aviv that was delivered free.
There you go.
It's a different era.
Well, I think
Here.
that he went to election...
newspaper, by the way, that was
It's a different era.
I think that he went to election because
If
of
you look-
ego.
if
It
you
was a
look-
big thing
no,
together
no.
that he could not survive in a
Not at
coalition
all.
together with his
Not at all.
partners who were trying to get
in the minute
cash
they put
for...
to vote the end of this newspaper, that was the sign for Bibi, the telephone that he got, okay, let's let's erase this government because this vote is void. It's
Well,
not existent anymore.
Benny?
It could very well be true. I'm not really privy
This is
to
really
that phone
speculation.
conversation.
Yeah.
I haven't been on the line. I'm yet to tap the prime ministers. By the way, no secret emails as of yet were found in, but that's beside. But I think he went to election. I mean, what he said, the reason he went to election is because you can't continue to have, and this is very important, you can't continue to have a government in which some of your government partners, in this case it was Livni and Lapid, continue to talk against you publicly, and actually also the right wing was continuing to talk against him. Bennett was talking against him as well.
During the war.
Yeah, during the war, exactly.
And
But
Benny,
Benny, isn't
wait a
that
minute.
exactly what's going to happen now?
This is a very important point, exactly, because, I mean, part of the problem of the Israeli system is that all governments are going to be like that. It's going to be very, and Itzik was absolutely right. It could very well be that in a year and a half, you guys will have to shell out again and pay for us to come and entertain you. Well, maybe you'll get Mick Jagger instead. But the point is, you know, it's very difficult. The Israeli system is very difficult. There are a lot of pressures. One of them could be, actually, Bibi is not the first Israeli politician who has American backers. Israeli politicians do have American backers, always. Look at Barak's campaigns, look at Peres's campaigns.
A newspaper that the first 17 pages.
I don't want to get into your business. I mean, you're in newspapers. I understand.
And your publisher
and
actually sued him,
I,
so let's not get into a politics like that.
As somebody who is very pro First Amendment in the United States, I think that maneuver to ban an Israeli newspaper, I was against that.
Yeah, I want to touch on something. Just I know it's a beautiful
legislation.
topic.
Ban it by legislation.
Well, we need to have
So
a follow-up.
a foreign multimillionaire can decide the election in two countries, in America and in Israel. And everybody First Amendment.
Any owner of any media, including the former owner of Channel 2 in Israel, who is also an American millionaire, including a lot of anybody who wants to invest in Israel.
He went according to Israeli law. If you talk about Ron Lauder or Milchen or Milchen, any one of them.
Anybody who wants to invest, and this is for
Went
all
to
of you.
go according to regulation.
Wait. Anybody who wants to invest in any enterprise in Israel.
I want to pose another question. We focus on the right. We focus on the left.
He's a great American. A great American.
Let's talk about the center for a minute. We have Yair Lapid of Yesh Atid. We have Kahlon of the Center Party, Kulanu. Really, Itzik, let's start with you. How come they run on the same socio-economic agenda, which you indicated to be a hot topic for the Israeli electorate, and they're not running together? Not to join forces on that important issue?
That's a question of ego. Bibi, there's nothing about ego. In this case, ego speaks.
They actually negotiated to run together.
After the elections, one of them will get more votes, and then they'll join forces to impose together the next coalition.
Maybe not, but just to make a point, I think that Lapid surprised everyone in the last election by making an alliance with Bennett, which surprised everybody much more than his future alliance with Kahlon. But I think the word ego is very, very important here because it goes back to what I was saying before, and that is that Israeli politics is so fractured, and one of the reasons is, let's compare this to the American system. Once somebody bolts out of the Republican Party and runs alone, he has a very tough hill to climb. In Israel, if you run alone and if you manage to make the minimum, hey, you can become a very important factor in Israeli politics even if you started yesterday. So you know, I think that the question of ego plays a large part of all this movement in between parties and the formation of new parties and all that. A lot of people, and again, as I said, you know, there are lots of Likud people, former Likud people, who are important players nowadays and probably will. And
that's kind of embarrassing when you sit here and you say, do those politicians don't have any morals? I mean, one day you're on the far right, and then tomorrow you go and become part of the Labour Party, which is on the left.
Politicians always don't have morals.
No, but
and then they do. I mean, they also do.
But you don't see that often, for instance, here in the United States, of like, you know, someone, Republicans and Democrats.
Are you saying that there are American politicians with ego, or that they have no morals? I'm shocked.
No, but you really, I
Ron,
mean,
but the
Tzipi Livni was Likud. She was Likud. Her family is all Likud. And now she is the leader of the Labour Party.
Olmert was also Likud.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. This is very embarrassing.
He created the slogan, Paris will divide Jerusalem.
Yes.
All this nonsense.
And Sharon was Likud, and he created
of course.
Kadima.
So what happened to those guys?
But we're sitting here in the US and explaining Israeli politics to American, and I'm listening to us, and we're sounding like this is a banana republic of sorts.
There is an answer.
Great bananas, by the way.
The answer to that is that it's one thing to be an ideologic guy in an ideologic party, and it's a completely different thing to sit on the seat of the prime minister and start running a country. So that's what happened to all those guys.
So just
they have to be much more balanced and serious.
So just before we go,
things that you see from over here, you don't see from over there, as they say in Hebrew.
You know,
the grass is always greener.
Just before, let's end this session with a sentence. I'll complete. You end. Israel's next prime minister is.
What is the day? Today I think it's Herzog, but only today. I don't know about tomorrow.
Yeah. Just for today.
Bibi is a great closer, but I would say Herzog. I would let me rephrase that. The grandson of the Grand Rabbi of Ireland will be elected Prime Minister of Israel on St. Patrick's Day.
Very nice. Ron?
I didn't even think about that. I think Israel is waiting for Herzog to be the next prime minister, so let's wait and see.
Can you imagine agreement on an Israeli media panel? Thank you very much. Thank you.